You're listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of Web Trends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. Web Trends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. After a long career covering a variety of C-level marketing roles within a number of prestigious media companies and well-known brands, Chris Lawson decided it was time for a change. He saw a gap in the market where his wealth of experience could be valuable to companies that were unable to engage a full-time chief marketing officer. He formed Moreno Marketing and began offering his services as a CMO for hire. A year later, Chris set about creating and delivering a series of podcasts with long-term friend Sam Money. Across the Pond has just completed its fourth series, over which time it has helped educate marketers at all stages of their career. In today's episode, I talked to Chris to see how he's been getting on. So Chris, it's good to meet a fellow podcaster, although you and your colleague Samuel Money have been hosting Across the Pond for a lot longer than I've been doing it. What was it that stimulated the desire to start up a podcast channel?
Yeah, hi John. It's great to be here. Sam and I, we thought about it for a while. I wanted to do a podcast and find a way of sort of giving something back, thinking around how I could help sort of share some of the experiences. And talking to Sam, that was very similar to what he wanted to do as well. So we thought that we'd give it a go. That's over a year ago now. Time flies.
This year has gone completely nuts anyway because of COVID, but it all seems very strange. How did you meet Samuel?
So Sam and I used to work together a long time ago now. Probably we're talking about like 1998. So that totally dates me, maybe even a little bit earlier. That was in Safeway retailers, now sort of taken over by Morrison.
That was my first Saturday job.
Was it really? There you go.
Working at Safeways, yes.
And Sam worked in category management, which was the sort of future thinking around retail at the time. And I was working in relationship marketing, which was sort of future thinking about marketing techniques, which obviously then evolved into direct marketing, digital marketing, sort of CRM and the like, really. But very, very early days. So we were at the forefront of what we were doing. Also a love of football and beer.
Well, that always brings people together, doesn't it? You talk predominantly in your podcast about marketing. Across the Pond deals with, I think it's Philadelphia and London. Are there any differences between the US and the UK? And if so, are any of them behind one another?
Yeah, it's a really good point. When we set out to do this, what we wanted to try and do was create a podcast that was sort of inspire success, help build a growth mindset, and really talk to people, whether they were an entrepreneur, whether they were a sort of rising star in the start of their marketing career, or whether they were an experienced sort of CMO or marketing professional looking for new ideas. And we were looking at it from a perspective of trying to sort of highlight some of the differences between America and the UK. And I think what we found is that there's a progressive mindset, which is exactly the same in the US as it is in the UK, which is very much about that learning mindset. It's very much about how do you put purpose at the heart of your marketing? How do you take a more sort of compassionate approach in terms of your leadership style as well? So I think we found valid examples both sides of the pond, which has been really, really reassuring. In terms of some of the technical aspects, again, it's hard to do a direct comparison because I tend to work on some of the more sort of startups or SME end of the market, and Sam a little bit more of the established sort of players as well. So it's really there's various different examples of being ahead of the curve or behind the curve, both sides of the pond. I think what's fascinating is that it does give us a couple of different perspectives. So we really enjoy that sparring nature of looking at it from US and UK.
Have you got any kind of examples where you feel that one country has been ahead or behind the other?
Yeah, I think culturally, it's probably the best example. obviously sort of in the States is at the hard edge when you look at sort of movements such as sort of Black Lives Matters. And I think in a way, Europe has been ahead when it thinks about sort of looking at a sustainable marketing strategy or a sustainable business strategy, and making sure that environmental concerns are put there. So that cultural movement of understanding that there's a opportunity to do the right thing, do good in the world as well as make money, I think is very important. So for various difference of matters, I think both the States or the UK has managed to lead the way.
So, would you say that your podcasts are probably primarily educational?
Yeah, very much so. I think we set out to try and achieve a couple of things when we did it. The first thing was we wanted to share that actually a lot of the marketing that you need, whether you're that entrepreneur or that rising star, is out there, and there's some great practice already out there, and you don't need to suddenly go and spend £10,000 on a master's or a course. So we wanted to share our knowledge and experience. The second thing was that ultimately I'm there talking around the need to actually sort of get your content strategy out there, use different channels to communicate your message. And this is a great way for us to learn about a new media channel and work out the pitfalls and the cons, and I'm sure you've come across them as well, and really keep us fresh, keep us actually learning all the time and exploring new matters and exploring new channels. So living what we preach, basically.
And have you started to look at inviting guests, people with different knowledge other than you and Simon?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because we've done 4 series now, so we've just done a year's worth of content, and we wanted to sort of set it out as series so that we could really almost layer it, so there was almost a course already ready-made for anyone that wanted to listen. The first series was Essentials of Marketing. The second one was a marketing deep dive. The third series was all about the modern marketeer, thinking about it in a post-COVID world. And the series we've just done, we titled our Agile Marketing Action Plan, to try and lay out in sort of 13 episodes the cornerstones, the skills, the mindsets that you're going to need, and also the behaviors for your marketing. So series 5, we're going to be inviting guests onto the podcast to really help us explore some of the angles we've looked at. So for CRO, for example, we're going to be making sure that we get a CMO that is relevant in that area. The same in terms of sort of entrepreneurial leadership. And we've got a few people lined up already. So yeah, coming soon.
And do you think that you align yourselves with anything like the Chartered Institute of Marketing or anything like that, which is much more technical, I would suppose, as opposed to operational?
Yeah, it's a good point. And there's absolutely a place for theory as well as practice. I think what we wanted to do with this was demonstrate that by rolling your sleeves up and getting stuck in, you could achieve quite a lot. And actually, when you look back at both our careers, I was there right at the advent of digital marketing, and there was no courses, there was no established books or philosophies around digital marketing. It was a case of you have to try, experiment, learn from your failures, and then start again. So that's very much what we've tried to do, to sort of demonstrate that via the podcast. I'm not saying that there isn't value in aligning with something like the sort of Chartered Institute of Marketers or any of the other courses out there. Of course there is, but we just want to make sure we provide a practical guide that's out there and easily accessible.
So, Chris, moving away slightly from the podcasts and more onto your kind of recent history. In the last couple of years, since leaving Virgin Wines, I think it was, you've positioned yourself as a CMO for hire. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was something that I'd been thinking about probably for the last few years of when I was in full-time CMO positions. I can trace it right back to when I was sort of CMO of The Guardian. Well, even before that, Absolute Radio, to be honest. So I was brand director at Absolute Radio. That was a transformation project, really, in essence. How do we move from being Virgin Radio to Absolute Radio? Guardian, which was probably the largest, highest profile role that I did, sort of being CMO there, was looking at how do we move Guardian from being a newsstand, predominantly newsstand operation, into something with membership and subscription at the heart of it. And obviously you see that at the base of the Guardian today. Then I went into gaming. Then I went to Virgin Wines and a few other bits and pieces in between. But all of those were transformation projects. All of those were about how do you move an organization successfully from point A to point B. And that's the bit I love doing. That's the bit that I add value in. It's not really about running a sort of a steady state marketing team for sort of 6-7 years. It's very much about helping those organizations transform. And I thought, what better way to do that than actually set up on my own? And that's what I've done. I think the other point to mention, which I'm sort of quite a believer in, having worked in the sort of software technology industry in gaming for about 3 or 4 years, what also was really apparent to me is that the whole of the tech industry sort of moves towards that freelance outsourced model. And I see no reason really why marketing will not be moving there. And again, I wanted to make sure I was ahead of that curve.
So, what excites you about being an interim?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the way that I see it is I can come in, quickly analyze and assess the situation, roll my sleeves up and get executional as well as sort of strategizing at board level and make a difference fast. And sadly, unfortunately, when you start to become part of the establishment, whether you're part of a full-time team, you end up getting distracted from the core task that you've been asked to do. Politics starts to play a part, meetings definitely starts to play a part, administration and the like. Whilst I can actually focus very much on what is the number one thing that needs to happen and make sure that all of my energies and all of the team's energies are focused on that and not distracted. So I love that focus. I love that sort of practical nature, and that objectivity that you can get from sort of coming in as well. And ultimately seeing success, John. That's really the measure. The measure is actually the fact that they don't need you anymore. That's when you know you've done a good job.
So, that methodology of being on the outside looking in, and with that comes the power and ability to tell it like it is, I suppose. Have you ever suffered from any of the decisions that you've made of being too harsh, for instance?
Yep, I think so. Without naming any names, there's an uncomfortable truth, which is, yeah, actually, I'd say the majority of organisations that I've worked for, they want to know the truth. They want to understand what is going on within their organisation in order to make it better. Yeah, and their measure of success of making it better may well be acquisition growth or retention or top line or bottom line, whatever it is. And that's my role in order to do that. But quite often there may be some preconceived ideas as to what is going wrong and where the issues are. And quite a lot, it comes down to leadership and culture, what I find. At the heart of pretty much everything that we do is that cultural part. And culture tends to start with the founder, tends to start with the organization as a whole. And my goal is to help provide that clarity and that impact. So sometimes there's some tough conversations to be had with founders and CEOs, and just go, do you know what? You've actually got your maths wrong, or alternatively, what you've done is that you're assuming the organisation feels one thing and they actually feel something quite different. Now, I haven't been, gladly I can say I haven't been in a situation where any projects haven't taken their way forward. I've always managed to navigate that with a CEO or founder in time, but they're tough conversations. But that's the role, really.
Yeah, it's a bit like calling your baby ugly, isn't it?
There is that.
But that leadership and culture is often ingrained in a business. It must be really challenging to make a shift in culture.
It is, and it's also challenging to do it in a short time scale. and it's challenging to do it when you're remote as well, as we're all finding it now, rather than being able to look in the whites of eyes of the employees and be there day in day out, which is just not a possibility. So I think the philosophy that I've got is that it isn't about me making a change. It's about the organization making a change. It's about empowering the organization to affect change. So that's about providing some sort of guide rails, some frameworks to work within. Like I say, holding up a mirror to both the sort of CEO and the teams in terms of where their real potential is and where the opportunity is, and calling out any sort of area that isn't really authentic. And then it is about practicalities. It's giving good examples, and by doing that, by focusing on the brand, focusing on the product or service that needs affecting, and organizing a new working model around that. So it is possible. And I think one of the other things that I found, having worked at some huge organizations such as Virgin or Guardian or Bauer, the media sort of company, and then working at some startups which have got a bit more of a can-do attitude and go, do you know what? We haven't got 9 months. We've got 9 days. How are we going to get this done? So bringing some of that startup mentality into some established players, I think, is also important.
So just touching a little bit on your kind of CV here, you mentioned a couple of names there: Bauer Media, Absolute Radio, Guardian News, lots and lots of media companies. You would think actually that you would have sustained your career further on and stayed in that media centric kind of organization, yet you made the choice to move to a gaming company. Why was that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very conscious choice, but it wasn't an immediate one, to be honest. I came out of the Guardian, completely proud of what I've achieved, but I'd sort of spent 12 years at the sort of top level of sort of media organisations, and I thought I've really got a choice. I'm either going to stay within media, which is incredible fun, some brilliant people in there, and I absolutely still love with an absolute passion, and I could stay within the media stream. Or alternatively, I could see the trend that was happening, which was all around content marketing, and the fact that actually using media content or content in different types of sectors was going to become the fore. So I using my experience from the media sector and working at how I can apply it to different sectors. So I took about 9 months working with a few different types of organizations, and then went into gaming and tried to apply a lot of the knowledge and expertise that I'd found from the media sector into that. And I'm really glad I did, because again, it's about learning, it's about stretching yourself, putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, so that you can learn faster and applying that knowledge to help others. So it helped me achieve that goal, really.
It must have been quite a steep learning curve coming out of somewhere like The Guardian or whatever, which is, I would imagine, have been quite staid up until that point, to working in a kind of a very in the moment kind of company such as gaming. Was it very different to what you'd done before?
Yeah, chalk and cheese. Honestly, it was complete opposites. I think culturally it was very, very opposite. It was quite combative in a way. Assertive would be another way of putting at it, but I think so combative, if we're honest,
Mm-hmm.
and navigating that. It was also an organisation on a huge growth trajectory, and a nice naivety about it in a way, as in, we are going to be a global player. We are going to launch on the NASDAQ. And by the way, actually, you've only got £180,000 marketing budget to make that happen. And I
Goodness.
liked the fact that actually, there was huge ambitions, but not that much resources in a way, and therefore we had to be creative about what we wanted to achieve. Whilst the Guardian, in a way, was just one of the most powerful brands in the world, and helping sort of navigate that and shift it required a lot of dedication, a lot of effort by a huge amount of people, and sort of shifting it around sort of slowly as well as trying to move dynamically.
Would that mean that there were very few lessons that you'd learned over the time in the media that you could cross over into this new gaming world?
No, loads and loads of lessons. I think one of the most important one was the the need to get close to your customer, the fact that actually, unless you really truly understand your customer, then all you're basing your decisions on is yet another opinion. So I think bringing in that need to be a little bit more scientific, planning out the approach, but at the heart of it, understanding what your audience want, I think was the most crucial one. I think media companies do that very well. They're in tune with their audiences and they talk to them every day. When it's fascinating, you go in a number of different sectors, not just calling out gaming, and you can get actually quite far away from your customer.
Over the years, you must have seen a sizable change in how marketing is now less about the tagline, and I can imagine that was somewhat in the Guardian's mind, or the correct Pantone colour, or whatever it might be, to return on investment. What's been your own experience about how things have changed?
Yeah, great question. I think my time at Guardian was all about return on investment. It was all about actually how do we start moving ourselves forward into something where we've got a sustainable marketing strategy, and you have to think that in a way that's the type of marketing I've been doing since back in those Safeway days. That was early on, that was all about a return on investment. It was about direct marketing, and that's why it lent itself to me. Really, I think I sort of responded well to it. So using those different type techniques, whether that was sort of relationship marketing or CRM, or then into digital marketing, then into CRO, and being able to sort of measure response and test effectiveness, that's always been a core part of what I've done. I think the change that's happened is probably that balance where the more sort of traditional, above the line, sort of creative is really now sort of a part of a mix rather than being the dominant mix. And actually understanding that as much of the brand is not created by the advertising, it's created by the product, or the distribution channels, and understanding that it's probably a fairish slice of a pie, I would say, than it may well have been like 10 or 15 years ago. So that focus on ROI has been something that I'm passionate about, and I think in a way that's why marketing is increasing in relevance, not decreasing in relevance.
And so, therefore, I'd say that you actually, one of the advocates of marketing, has now earned its seat on the board.
Yeah, but I think we've got to be very careful about that statement, and I've used that in the past as well, which is, I think, is not about marketing earning a place on the board. I think it's about each individual organisation. You need to look at that and its own merits, and sometimes. Some organizations is about sort of understanding the role marketing can perform for you in that. Sometimes product can be as important, if not more important. So you've got to constantly strive to understand how marketing can be influential and achieve a company organization, rather than just expect that you've got that seat on the board.
So you're still a believer in the 4 Ps of marketing then?
Yeah, plus a few more, but
Yes.
I think the reality is that again, you look at it, you back to the old traditional 4 Ps. Marketing used to be responsible for those 4 Ps, all four of them, and now in reality, two of them it's not responsible for. It's not responsible for product, and it's not responsible for place or distribution. A lot of that is done through product as well. So again, a part of the role of marketing has shifted, where it's about collaboration with our product teams and collaboration to come up with a better answer, rather than going, actually, this is what marketing owns and this is what product owns.
In one of your recent podcasts, you aired the topic of how to excel at customer experience, in which you mentioned say goodbye to siloed marketing. Do you believe that the majority of companies still operate in marketing silos? And what's the danger of doing so?
Yeah, good question, John. I think that, if I'm honest, I think there are a lot of organizations that still are very siloed. And I think that the sooner we can get over that and break down those barriers, the better. It tends to be the more established organizations, but that could also equally apply to a sort of startup that may have been set up in a certain structure and is now needing to scale up 2 years into his journey, but has got a structure which they feel has worked, but in a way barriers have been sort of put up. But you have to say goodbye to that siloed thinking for the reasons that I was just talking about, that the role of product and marketing is so merged now, so interdependent, that actually unless you've got a clear collaborative team, then you're going to cause all sorts of problems for yourself.
So, how does that breaking up of those silos affect the people on the ground?
Well, I mean, I think it's a readjustment to how you define your role within your organization and potentially your career path as well. I think as humans, we like to sort of know where we are, and we like to know that this is what we do and this is what we don't do and this is how we're going to move. And there's a lot of grey areas when you're breaking up that silos. I think that's the most important thing, to be honest. You have to be able to live with ambiguity. You have to understand that as long as it's for the greater good and the sum does equal more than the individual parts, then it's the right thing to do. As soon as you start getting into, well, this is my territory, or if I'm not responsible for it, then I'm worried about what my role is, or someone else in the other team seems to be doing a bit more marketing than I am. Yeah, I've got marketing in my title. As soon as that type of sort of fears and doubts come in, then I think it reinforces the siloed thinking mentality. So culturally, on the ground, I think it's a huge thing, and it needs support from people like myself to help bring that through. Plus, of course, the founders and CEOs as well.
So, some companies have moved towards having a director of customer experience. That seems like a job of managing lots and lots of different areas without necessarily having the responsibility for any of those. Would you say that was a good idea of what that role entails?
Yeah, look, I mean, my role at Inspired, the gaming company, was very similar to that, and yeah, my title was sort of customer experience director or VP of sort of customer experience, and and you're absolutely right. There's a bit where you're facilitating and you're coordinating sort of skills and resources from a variety of different areas. So influencing skills are incredibly important. Also, the ability to understand that just because you don't have direct ownership of something doesn't mean that you can sit back. You have to take responsibility. The reason why that customer experience role is so important is that someone needs to be looking at the end-to-end experience so that they can look at it. A customer does not sit there and go, do you know what, I'm going to forgive them because that bit is run by marketing, that bit's run by product, and that bit's run by tech. They're going to be looking at that holistic experience and go, does it make sense or doesn't it make sense? So you need someone internally to look at that end-to-end experience.
And that director of customer experience, how would you say they would be best measured?
Great question. I think it's got to be exactly the same measures as the rest of the organization. At the end of the day, this can't be just a vanity role. It can't just be emperor's new clothes, which is a sort of the latest sort of marketing thinking needs that we need a director of customer experience. It has to be about, does it help us achieve our goals? Does it help us give a greater customer satisfaction? Does it help drive revenues? Does it help drive the bottom line ultimately?
Moving a little bit onto the Moreno Marketing, you offer what I think you call a commercial marketing audit. Could you explain what it is and why you feel it's important?
Yeah. So I started sort of thinking about the need for an audit back in well, still when I was sort of CMO of Virgin, really, where actually the first thing that I needed to do coming into the new organization, very similar to Inspired or Guardian, is you evaluate where the organization is in terms of what it needs to do with regards to its marketing strategy, where it's strong, where it's weak, where the opportunities for growth are, where the things are that if you don't put the foundations in place now, then you're going to be in trouble a year or two down the line, and where the quick wins are, where perhaps they've been missed up until that point. So that need for a marketing audit and a quick flash audit and evaluation of what's required, I think is incredibly important at that point. That can look at the brand, the product, and the marketing. And therefore, I created this audit where I can go quickly into organizations, effectively have a look under the bonnet, see what's going on, roll my sleeves up, provide a bit of a report card as to what's going well and what's need fixing, and try and do that in a way where the organizations are left with something that is very, very practical and very, very usable, a blueprint for the next stage of a journey. What I wanted to avoid was those sort of impenetrable 70-page presentations that you can get from management consultancies where you're left thinking, what am I now meant to do with this? I wanted to provide an actionable point. And then the second reason why I found the need for commercial marketing audits was certainly a lot of work that I've been doing has been in the startup and SME space where they're either looking for investment or VCs are assessing whether that organization is an important investment for them. And actually, a lot of that audit process is done by sort of generalists and the sort of commercial due diligence organizations that will go in and assess the operational sort of expertise of the organization, and they do a great job. But there's something about, would you want a GP to do heart surgery, and when the key drivers of a brand or a company tend to be about data, marketing, or brand, and customer, then I think it makes sense to have an expert get in there and evaluate what's going on.
I'm not saying that companies need heart surgery often, but would you not think that this kind of commercial marketing audit should be something that's done every 2 or 3 years?
Well, personally, I would love that because I think they're valuable and I enjoy doing them, and I think everyone that sort of does have the audit certainly feels that way as well. I think I think the other reality is that you, as a CMO, you can set your marketing strategy, which can take a couple of months to get around and through. And by the time you come back to do it again, you can think, right, well, actually, I just need to be spending the time doing. However, you've got to keep pulling yourself out of the detail and look and reevaluate. That has to be the job of a sort of a CMO, and to outsource that, to allow someone to do it, I think is a wise thing as well. So actually, I think the planning process needs to be on a quarterly basis. It needs to be a living, breathing organism, and I certainly would advise that you should go back and have a strategic look at what you're doing. I would say annually rather than sort of 2 or 3 years, to be honest, for the reasons that, as we've seen this year, the dynamics are just changing so fast that, in a way, I think the planning cycles we used to accept have completely speeded up.
One last question before we draw this podcast to a close, and it's very particular to podcasts, is that are there any tips and tricks that podcasters could use to be able to gain additional listeners to their podcasts?
That's a great question, and it's something that we're excited about because we're constantly exploring. Now, a couple of things that we found have made a big difference, and the first one is still fundamental. Have something that you're passionate about and you can talk authentically about, and you will find an audience. Now, it may not be a large audience, it may be a niche audience, but if it's a relevant audience, that's all that matters. I think sometimes we get confused whether we need to talk to 100 people or whether we need to talk to 10,000 people. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to treat this like your marketing strategy. That requires a multimedia channel approach. So think about the role of video, think about the role of text as well as audio. And you also have to think about how your own personal brand integrates into it as well. One of the things that we've learned along the way is that people like to interact, but sometimes people like to interact via video. Sometimes they like to read what we do. So we publish all of our podcasts on Medium, and we have snippets all available on YouTube as well. And we get a different type of listener, but ultimately it's driven all from the podcast.
Chris, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting discussion. It's nice to be able to see somebody who can go in there and take stock of other companies and actually start to drive a strategy. Because I think there's a lot of marketing departments that are out there today that are just doing the same old stuff and expecting the results to be different. But once again, Chris, thanks again.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure being on, and I've certainly enjoyed your podcast, and just encourage any of your listeners to check out Across the Pond if they haven't had a chance to up until now.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Bye bye now.